first talk about statistics about the class of 2026 before going into kind of the how to get into MIT, including the essay and the admissions, other components. So there are two types of admittance, I guess, into MIT: early action and regular action. This is pretty standard with other universities as well. So for early applicants, usually less people apply and less people get in by a lot. So early applications, there were like less than 15,000. Admits, they're less than 700. However, around 10K were deferred to regular action. And for regular action, there were around 19,000 applicants. And the total considered, including the deferred students from early action, were around 28,000. And out of those, there were 6,000 admits. 600 admits. And then there were 700 people roughly on the wait list. So the difference between early action and regular action for a student applying is mostly just when are you comfortable submitting the application. Like the name suggests, for early action, you have to submit the application a bit earlier. And for regular action, you have to submit it a bit later. So regular action for MIT, I believe the deadline is in December, January. And for early action, the deadline is in October, November. So that's already passed for this year. And the difference is just the time submitted. It doesn't lower your chances of getting in if you submit early action or raise your chances of getting in if you submit early action. And unlike other schools where there's something called early decision, for early action, if you get into MIT early action, if you're one of the 697 who got in, you have no obligation to go. That's just an option for you, and you can submit to as many early action schools as you want, including MIT. So this is very different from schools like Harvard, for example, where if you submit for their early decision or restrictive early action, you can't submit to other universities during the early cycle, and very different from Dartmouth, for example, which has early decision, where you only can submit to Dartmouth during the early cycle, and if you go, you are basically promising the school that if you get in, you will go. Yeah. So like I said, wait lists. Being on the wait list also means that you were pretty close to getting in, but you didn't quite make it. Unfortunately, for the class of 2026, no one from the waitlist was actually admitted in the end. And in terms of the demographic of US citizens versus internationals, we admitted around 1.2K US citizens and around 136 internationals. So MIT is quite, I guess, selective when it comes to both US citizens and international students. So what exactly does MIT look for in the students that it accepts? So there are a lot of different factors, obviously, but we're going to talk about the ones that I guess are aligned with MIT's like mens and manas, like hands and mind motto. So yeah, basically we're looking for someone that aligns with our mission. So not someone who's like a genius whiz kid necessarily, just someone who is trying their best to make the world a better place. And we obviously do understand that, as a high schooler, as a middle schooler before college, there's not much you can do for most people, so that's totally fine. They just like want to see the intent there. They also just want to see collaborative and cooperative spirit. So basically what we mean by that is we don't want to see someone who's just like very smart and works alone all the time. We do really, really value cooperation and collaboration. And the most successful students, in my opinion, also do work a lot with groups and work a lot in labs where they have to talk to other people and get like the expertise of not just their fellow students, but also mentors and also PhD students and faculty advisors and things like that. So those are some of the things that MIT looks for. MIT also looks for initiatives. So opportunities are a lot and very abundant at MIT, but they must be used, right? So for example, we have this program called the Europe, which is the undergraduate research opportunity program, where essentially it's geared to allow students who've never done research before to get this as an opportunity. It's really useful for students like me, since, for example, when I joined MIT, I actually had quite a bit of research experience in biology, but I didn't have any in computer science, which I ended up majoring in. So it was a great way for me to like go from zero experience in computer science to getting two research opportunities in computer science. So that's an example of research projects that MIT gives. I believe the statistics are around 60 to 70% of all undergrads end up doing a research like project with the lab, which is which is a great representation. MIT also gives seed money and obviously has interesting lectures. So as an example of seed money, we do have an entrepreneurship, I guess, department, and we also have specific programs and specific student clubs that really incentivize people to pursue their entrepreneurial projects. An example of a student-led one is called Project X. Essentially, every spring they give out grants of around $500 where you can apply and then build something. So, for example, some of my friends, my junior year, my third year, we built a foosball table that would um, automatically track like the score based on sensors and track everyone's like every player's general score into a Elo tracker online. So that's an example of something that isn't, it's pretty silly. It's not like something that will get published or anything, but that was an example of just being able to use money to do that. And obviously for more serious initiatives, I have friends who've started there are startups at MIT with seed money. There are a couple of programs there as well. And MIT has a lot of representation in Y Combinator, if you happen to have heard of it. Y Combinator is essentially a very selective like incubator project program where a bunch of you can like apply to join. And then if you get in, then you go to California and then you get like their resources and you get a lot of mentorship. The reason why I mentioned Y Combinator is there's a bunch of MIT grads who've gone there, and Y Combinator has had successful startups graduate. I think, for example, Cruise and Airbnb, if you have heard of those, happen to be Y Combinator alums. So back to MIT. MIT may offer all of these resources, but obviously if their students don't end up taking advantage of them, they're not like valued, right? So obviously we do value people who are going to take advantage and seize those opportunities. And finally, MIT does want to see a healthy amount of risk taking from its students. So MIT doesn't want people who only succeed and are afraid of failure. Obviously, people want to succeed more than they want to fail. But when you fail and when you take risks, you do learn resilience. So this is something that you can convey in your essays, for example, just knowing that failure is a part of life and it's normal, and kind of explaining how you persevered after failure is a very common theme of these essays. MIT also values hands-on creativity. So like I said, our Latin motto is, I cannot pronounce it, but it means minds in hand. Essentially what that means is we don't just want you to be very good at theoretical work. We also don't want you just to be good at practical work. We want you to apply theoretical knowledge to practical real-world problems. So we do have a very strong maker culture. What that means is we have a lot of resources and we have a lot of labs, and we have maker spaces where you can build not just your academic projects, but a lot of people just tinker and build their side projects as well. An example is my old dorm called East Campus. Every year we would build either a fort or a roller coaster in the courtyard of our dorm, and then we would have like a party on it. And this is, very much not run by administration, not run by any class or teacher. It's just like the dorm itself. And they would always have to get funding and get sponsors and such. So that was a very good example of, for me at least, how I first got integrated into maker culture at MIT, because I never picked up any kind of power tool before, and I got there and my friends were building this roller coaster my first year, so I just like helped build and learned how to build things essentially. I'm still not very good at it, not as good as a lot of the mechanical engineers, but just being in that environment was really a privilege, since it allowed me to kind of learn by osmosis essentially, kind of when my friends were building things I'd learned. Yeah, and then finally, MIT values intensity, curiosity, and excitement. So yeah, basically, we don't just want someone who, studies and does nothing else. We do want someone who is really, really excited about something. And usually, I would say that for MIT people who got admitted, I can't often pinpoint why they got in, but I will say that every one of them was very, very passionate. Every one of my friends was very, very passionate about at least one thing that wasn't just, their research. What that could be anything from like music to sports to fire spinning to just random hobbies, but just that kind of intensity and passion is something that is pretty special and pretty valued in the admissions process, and that's something that we hope that you'll have. Um, MIT also values its character. So we really, really look for people who not just are smart academically, but also are nurturing and will lift each other up. Anecdotally, I will say that I wouldn't have gone through MIT if I didn't have such supportive classmates and friends and professors who were very accommodating when things went up. So that community is something that I am very grateful that I was part of. And I really, really, truly do see that particular aspect of its character in my own experience at MIT. And MIT also values the ability to prioritize balance. This one is, to be honest, in real life, it's kind of harder because I know me, like a lot of MIT folks, like we just want to do everything. We're passionate about a bunch of different things. However, we theoretically have the ability to prioritize balance. So what that means is we really want you to, I mean, I think the issue I had is it wasn't that I just did my schoolwork. It was just I had way too many activities that I really wanted to do because there's so many cool activities and clubs here. So it was hard for me to decide what to keep and what not in order to have like, a social life and sleep and friends and actually do my schoolwork. So this is a work in progress for me and for other folks, but generally we want to see that you're not just, a really good academic, but you also do things to make you relax. You also have like other facets of your personality and of who you are. So how exactly does the selection process take place? So like a lot of colleges in the US, MIT has a holistic application. So what that means is it's not just by your test scores. They have to consider your packet as a whole, including the essays and such. So how it works is first the senior admissions officer considers your application kind of, as a whole, including your test scores, your essays, your extracurriculars, what else, your SAT, etc. And then they also take a look at your school report, which is kind of a overall snapshot of what classes your school offers and kind of what the environment of your school is. Next, if you make it past that part, you will then be evaluated by additional admissions officers who then summarize it for the admissions committee. So the summaries, along with the raw application, goes to the selection committee. And then there, it's not just the committee, but multiple groups of admission staff and faculty members will weigh in. So for example, if you indicated on your application that you want to study biology, perhaps they might get some biology professors to weigh in, things like that. And then the whole point of this is like, it's not just one person who will make or break um, your admissions application, it is a dozen. So the reason why MIT does this is by design. We don't want someone's inherent bias to cloud a judgment. If only one person has the ability to accept or reject you, they want to view all applicants' essays very evenly and make sure that at least a dozen people for every successful applicant will discuss the applicant's strengths and weaknesses before making a final decision. So yeah, like I mentioned, this process makes sure that no individual's biases will sway the decision unfairly. And we want to reiterate that the process is student-centered, not region-centered. So what that means is if you have like a friend from your own school that's very, very strong, that doesn't mean that your chance of getting are lessened. It means that potentially both of you might get in. So just keep that in mind and don't, feel the need to directly compete against peers. So I'm assuming you won't be able to, I'm assuming that even if your friend is very, very strong, or like someone from your country is very strong, that has no determination if you make it or not. So MIT has no quotas by school, state, or region. I will say MIT does tend to admit less internationals than US citizens, as evidenced by the stats. But besides that, there's no like official quota. And finally, readers, you're not disadvantaged if other really wonderful students from your school or your region area are also applying. Cool. If you have any questions, we do encourage you to write. You can reach admissions at admissions@mit.edu. Another resource that is really useful is if you go to mitadmissions.org, we have student and admissions faculty blogs there. So that's a good example of how you can kind of get a snapshot into life at MIT without looking at not just looking at the website, and without needing to reach out to individual cold email students. I would highly recommend the blogs. I actually looked at those when deciding whether to apply to MIT or not. And I found them very useful in kind of getting an idea of how life actually was at MIT and kind of trying to decide what extracurriculars to do. The blogs written by admissions officers do stand out a lot, but I recommend, if you have time, also look at the student ones because they give a very unique perspective into the school. I touched upon this earlier, but early action versus regular action has no difference in your probability of getting into MIT. The only difference is the date of the deadlines. So the only reason that we have early versus regular action is just so that we can look at applicants during a longer period of time. So like I mentioned before, early action, the deadline is in November. So if you look at the application components, they're all the same as the regular action ones. So you'll need to submit your general application components, including your essays, activities, and academics, letters of rec, school reports, SAT or ACT, and I guess there is a February updates and notes form. That is what you, as the name suggests, submit in February. Essentially, if you have anything significant that could sway your application, like if you won a particular award, or if you got a state trophy or something in track, you could update it in your form. You also need to put your mid-year grades there. That's just kind of saying the grades are only there. Basically, if you get really, really, really bad grades, there is a possibility that you might get your acceptance rescinded. Otherwise, if your grades are the same as what they were, you should have no issue at all. Regular action, again, components are the same. Even the mid-February date is the same. The only difference is the January deadline. So this, I guess, is already passed for this year. So hopefully, if you did apply to MIT, you have already submitted your application. But I guess both regular decision and regular action, early action candidates need the February updates and notes form next month. So a friendly reminder, if you have had anything important that has that you've won or that has changed between your application submission and February, be sure to include that in your February updates and notes form. Let's talk about what exactly is in the application. So biographical information is pretty straightforward. Academics, essays, and activities. The rest of the stuff we'll kind of talk about more in this presentation, but as an overall thing, in addition to your biographical information, you also need to list some extracurriculars. You need to write a couple of essays. You need 2 letters of recommendation and 1 from your counselor. You need your SAT or ACT. MIT, unlike some other schools, re enabled the requirement for SAT, ACT after the pandemic. Interview is optional and creative portfolio is optional. So, like I mentioned, MIT during the pandemic didn't have the SAT, ACT requirement, but now it is non-optional again. So we're going to take a quick look at the SAT, ACT middle percentile. So for math, you can kind of see we have a lot of students who are really good at math. They're pretty good at math. The median, the middle 50% are 800. So we highly recommend that if you apply to MIT, you try to score as well on math as you can in specific. Reading and writing, still pretty good, but less, perfect. The middle 50% score 730 and 780 to 780. ACT is 35, 36 per category usually for math, reading, and English, and composite, and for science is 34 to 36. So this isn't to say that if you don't score like a 790 in math, you're not getting into MIT. It's just saying that, that's what the middle 50% score. So if you want a competitive application, I recommend trying to get as high of a math and SAT score in general. If you do decide to apply. Okay, so let's talk about the extracurricular profile. So MIT values quality over quantity when it comes to extracurriculars. They only ask for 4 activities. I guess as a disclaimer, I think when I applied, they allowed more, like up to 10, I believe. And I happen to be, I guess I happen to do a lot of activities well. Like I guess after this slide, I'll kind of talk about some of the things I did. But before I do that, I just want to reiterate, they really value quality over quantity. You don't have to, do as many activities as I did. You just have to do the ones that you are passionate well. So again, don't try to, think about what will MIT want me to see in my application. Just pick what is important to you, since oftentimes I find that students tend to be more passionate and try harder and really, really spend that time and effort into activities that they're passionate about, rather than activities I think will be good for the college app. So given that, MIT does value creativity and leadership, so do try to find activities that really bring that out in your application. Again, some students have a lot of activities, other are just a few, and that's totally fine. Again, quality over quantity is what I would recommend. So let me just pull up my activities real quick so I can give a rundown. So for example, let's see, pulling it up. So for me, what I do? Okay, so again, I think what I did was more, I guess, generalist than you really need. But I founded a charity club at my called Project Huaihua at my high school, and I was able to get $10,000 in donations for a fire that was had devastated a village in China. I also did charity work around 90 hours for the Lions Club, which was basically a nonprofit in the area that did work to try to bring dental supplies, bring optometry supplies to youths who needed it in the area. Also a lot of tutoring. I also played piano for a local church, as well as piano-wise, I won a bunch of competitions. including some state and national ones when I was little. I do not play piano anymore. Other activities I did included I was president of the science club at my school. So we actually won a national championship in one of the science tournaments that we did. I was also president of the Model UN club at my school and won a couple of awards as a competitor in that club. I was president of Quiz Bowl Club. We made nationals 2 years in a row. I was president and founded biology club at my school. What do we do? We essentially hosted a we ran science experiments and study group sessions for students at my school and invited mostly UC Berkeley professors to give lectures. I also was vice president of History Bowl Club. That is also an academic competition. We also made nationals for that one. Vice president of Math Club. We would just do math competitions local usually. I was captain of the varsity tennis team. I was on the varsity track and field team. And those were the clubs that I did. And I had a bunch of awards, not limited to, but including. We have this in the US, we have this thing called like AP awards. So if you take AP classes, which are advanced classes, very similar to the IB program that your school might have, and you get enough APs, you can get like these AP awards. So my time, I think I got 8. I took eight AP exams. So I got like the National AP Scholar Award, for example. I also made it to the finals of the semifinals of the USA Biology Olympiad. And then, things here and there. And then was competitive in piano, won a bunch of awards there. Trying to look at this. And for track, I qualified for states a couple times. So back to the general overview. Again, I think I did more than 4 activities, but those are the ones that made me happy. And I think I did show leadership and did do them well, and not just like, did the activities for the sake of saying that I could do the activities. So for example, the leadership when I was vice president and president of all the clubs and captain of the tennis team, for example, shows that. So tying this back again, I found it productive to find room for many activities, but you definitely don't have to do as many as I did. You can do more if you have the bandwidth. You can do less if you want to. Just make sure that whatever you're doing, you're truly passionate about, and it really brings out your best. Cool. Next, let's talk about letters of rec. So essentially, MIT requires 2 letters of rec from teachers. One rec should be from a math science teacher, and one should be from a humanities, social science, and language teacher. So even if you're, sure that you want to just study math or science, or even if you're sure you want to study humanities, don't we recommend not getting 2 letters of rec from teachers from a very similar subject as each other. The reason again is MIT wants a holistic applicant, so they want to see that you're not just, focused on one part of your studies, but you're very versatile and good at the other ones as well. So for me personally, I got a letter of rec from my AP biology teacher, and I got a letter of rec from my AP Spanish teacher. And these are some of the potential subjects that you can use as your math science and as humanities, social studies, and language subjects. Yeah, so and I guess to clarify, if you do go to a school where English isn't your primary language of education, you don't need to take foreign language. But if you do go to a primary English focused school, we do recommend that you have other foreign language experience as well. So for example, for me, I took AP Spanish, and I also took AP Mandarin, even though I took AP Mandarin mostly because I'm a native speaker in Mandarin as well. Yeah. Finally, let's talk about the creative portfolio part of your application. So this one is optional. You don't have to do it. I happen to submit a piano recording of myself as part of it, but this usually, I have a lot of friends who got to MIT without this portfolio. I have a lot of my friends who got to MIT with this portfolio. So it's not a requirement. It's just like if you have something to submit, you can submit it. Otherwise, don't try to develop something specifically for it. So one particular thing you could submit for this creative portfolio is research. So if you have done a significant research project outside of your classes, like for example, if you intern at a nearby lab, or if you did a summer online program or something, and you did original research, you can submit your thesis or you can submit your project. Also, just make sure to have a brief questionnaire about your research and another letter of rec from your research mentor. So this is separate from the letters of rec that I said MIT would ask for earlier with the teachers. Another example of what you could put in your creative portfolio is music and theater arts related. So what that means is essentially, if you do have a performing talent, so for example, if you play the piano, or if you are a dancer, or you're a designer, or you can compose music, or you're an actor or writer, you are welcome to submit your work as well. So for musicians, this is the one I did. You submit 2 recordings representing contrasting styles or periods, and each selection has to be unedited. And if you're a composer, you would submit one of your compositions in PDF. If you are a actor or designer, director or dancer, you would submit videos or images of yourself dancing or acting or doing whatever. And if you're a writer, you would submit your scripts. So again, this is a very optional part of your application, but if you do have a talent that does fall into one of these categories, that one or the next one to talk about, it could provide a glimpse of who you are as a person outside of just your essays and your written application. And finally, if you do have experience with visual art and architecture, you can submit that in your portfolio as well. So for example, I had a couple friends who had maker experience before MIT, so they built things that they were able to take pictures of and submit as a portfolio here. And then, makers, this is also the one. So if you are a project, if you, like, for example, are good at building rockets or something like that, and you want to submit it, this is also a great way to do so. Next, let's talk about the interview. So this is also optional. Not everyone will get offered an interview. However, if you are offered one, I recommend you take it. I'll explain why in a bit. So logistically, how the interview works is MIT will try to find someone, alumni, to talk to you who will either be in your geographical area or will have like similar experiences or similar interests. So if you happen to be international, for example, there are much fewer MIT alumni abroad than there are in the US. So if you don't get an interview, that doesn't mean that you're not getting in. If you get an interview, that doesn't mean that you're more likely to get in. It's solely based on the availability of the alumni interviewers. So however, if you do get someone to reach out to you, I would highly recommend that you go actually schedule the interview. And the reason why is because this interview is not just a way for MIT to evaluate you, it's also a way for you to evaluate MIT and kind of determine if you think that would be a good fit for you. So if you have questions on the process you want to ask, or questions on what it's like being a student at MIT, I would highly recommend that you ask your interviewer. The reason being, they're not the official MIT website. They're going to have a more candid response to your questions. And because MIT does try to pair you as the interviewee to an interviewer who has similar interests, it's very likely that if they are interested in things similar to what you're interested in, perhaps you can learn about what clubs they did and their experience and what they would change if they had to do college again. So really good opportunity for you to information gather as well as present your best self. So the interviews are pretty informal. They can range from 30 minutes to 2 hours. I think mine was supposed to be around an hour, but I actually did I guess, bond pretty well with my interviewer, and we ended up talking like more than 2.5 hours, but you don't have to stay that long. But before you meet with your interviewer, definitely don't try to go do some research. So try to talk to friends and family about interview experiences if they have gone through any. I would highly recommend reading the blog entries and think about stories and examples that kind of paint yourself as a very passionate person who exhibits some of the qualities that we talked about previously. And again, um, it would be helpful for you to kind of think about why you want to go to MIT in particular, as opposed to some other universities that have like similarly great credentials academic wise and such. So, in order to get that read, I would recommend reading the blog entries, especially from students, not just from the admissions officers. So that will kind of give you a sense of what is unique about MIT. So, as an example, one of the things I talked about was I actually had heard about the maker. I heard about the building the fort and the fort and or the roller coaster in the beginning of the year and having that party. So that's something that I had questions about, and my interviewer happened to live in that dorm, so she was able to give me some personal insights on kind of what she first thought about that dorm and how to be my best self. Something else that I did ask about is that undergraduate research opportunity program because I was interested at that point in doing biology research, but I had some questions and asked her about her research experience. Some other stuff is MIT does have a program called FPOP, which is the first before orientation. There is an optional 1 week program called freshman. FPOP stands for first year pro. Sorry, I don't actually know what it stands for. Let me look it up real quick. Pre or Freshman pre-orientation program, FPOP, where essentially you get to try, you get to hang out with people from one, I guess, like one a subject, and then you get to do fun stuff together. So it doesn't have to be academic. And as example, one of my friends did the freshman arts program. So what they did was basically they made a screenplay, and everyone from that program, no one studied, acting. Everyone studied, well, I guess math and science of some sort. But it was just a really fun way for them to like they got together to make the screenplay, and they also were able to explore the city of Boston and also explore campus. What I did was the ocean engineering program. So I again had no interest in being mechanical engineering, which is the um, department that ocean engineering falls underneath. But I was really interested in ocean science since the national competition that my science team won was actually ocean science related. So I got to hang out with some ocean engineering students, and then we got like budget to like we had the program paid for us to like go out and like eat a bunch of food, explore Boston, do like tourist things in Boston, including like a duck boat tour, which is a really cool experience where you go on a bus around the city and then the bus turns into a boat and then you go into the water. And then also we were able to do indoor skydiving and such like that. So my point is that was another thing that I asked for, and that the reason why I knew about this experience was because of the blogs. So highly recommend reading the blogs. And in general, the interviews are not formal. Don't dress like business formal. I would recommend dressing nicely. So for me, my interview was in a coffee shop. So I remember wearing a dress and a nice blouse. Usually, your interviewer will probably dress less formally than you, but just it's polite to dress a bit more formally than what would be what your interviewer would wear, and probably I recommend like a bit like either if it's dinner, would recommend dressing more formally than if it was coffee, as it was for me. And finally, as true for all parts of the application, just be yourself. So what I mean by that is, again, MIT isn't looking for a particular kind of person. Just be a nice person, be yourself, be genuine, be passionate. I would say for honestly for this interview, just don't like be yikesy. Don't show any red flags. You should be fine. This is honestly just a way for you to get to know the university more and for you to get your questions answered is how I'd phrase this. Just relax and you'll do fine. Cool. Next, let's talk about essays. So these, unlike some other schools that use a common application, for MIT, we use shorter essays, but more of them. So these essays, we're asking for approximately 200 words each. And then there's one final open-ended text box where you can tell us anything else that we really should know if it doesn't sort itself into one of the essays, but you feel like it's really useful for your application. I'll quickly go over the essays and what I personally wrote. So tell us about something you do simply for the pleasure of it. I wrote about playing poker with my tennis team, and kind of just, that's not something that I could put as an extracurricular, the poker part. I just kind of wrote about why I liked it, and I guess like why I liked calculating the odds and things like that. Describe the world I came from. How has the world shaped your dreams and aspirations? For this, I talked about my science team. It's because I would spend like more than 6 hours a week with them outside of school, and they became my primary friends and my primary support network. Um, I, I will say you don't have to make any of these essays specifically about your major. And please don't just write about your love for computer science or biology. MIT does want to see people who, like I said, have passions outside of just academics. Third question, describe one way you've collaborated with people who are different for you to contribute to the community. This one I wrote about playing piano at our local church, because as a personal note, I personally am not religious, but I really admire religion. And I kind of used this essay as a way to talk about the beauty I found of like people and community service from the church and music. And significant challenge I faced, how to manage the situation. This one I'm not going to share in this forum because what I wrote was very personal. But for this, I would say that the most powerful motivators of who we are oftentimes are traumatic. So if you do have a situation, unfortunately, which does qualify for this, it can be a very powerful way for you to show a bit of vulnerability and kind of show how you manage adversity. And then generally, this question I get asked a lot: how do you maximize your chance of getting to MIT? Um, so basically, try to pursue your passions and interests, and obviously get good grades and study for the SATs and ACTs. Do not think solely about what will get me into MIT. Like, don't try to pick extracurriculars just because you think they'll get you into MIT. I would definitely prioritize extracurriculars that you're passionate about, because those are the ones that you're most likely to truly succeed and have fun doing so. And preparing yourself means two things. It means that you are ready to do the work, because I'm not going to lie, MIT does have a lot of work, and finding that work-life balance is hard, but it's something that you need to try to prepare for, and that you will hone if you get in and as you go through university. And also do make sure to take time to explore things that really interest you, both academically and non-academically.